Hey friends, this is part 3 of what I guess is now the How Powerful is Minecraft Steve series. I'll try and make sure the other two aren't required to watch this one, but go ahead and check them out if you're interested. In the first video, I wrote this formula and used it to determine that the mass of water in an in-game water bucket is about 2 quadrillion kilograms. In the second one, I made some corrections and took some suggestions from the comments to figure out how much Steve could actually lift, with the heaviest setup being an inventory full of shulker boxes, each filled with blue ice, weighing a total of 41 sextillion kilograms. And then I went on to use that to figure out how hard Steve can punch, and how hard he could ram into something, using what I dubbed his kinetic boat bombardment attack. For this video, you guys and your stupid great points suggested a bunch of stuff that I didn't account for, or that might increase the weight even further. There were so many suggestions that this video's length ballooned out of control and I still only covered half the topics. So in the interest of me sleeping at some point, I guess I'm already committed to part 4. For now, let's start with a few possible corrections. First, a bunch of people said that I forgot to talk about packed ice and blue ice, but it's in there friends, I promise. A huge oversight that I did make was that for the final number, with all the blue ice and the shulker boxes, I used 3.62 as the ratio between Earth gravity and Minecraft gravity, when it should have been 3.26. So that total of 41 sextillion kilograms should be closer to 37 sextillion kilograms. And that wasn't the only major error I made, because minutes after the last video went up, user FRCubit pointed out that I used 36 as the number of slots in a chest, instead of 27. And they're right, I totally said that. Oops. That mistake doesn't affect Steve's lifting strength, but it does mean I overestimated the power of both his punch and the kinetic boat bombardment attack. So here are the real numbers for those. I've triple-checked all the math this time around, and I'm pretty sure I didn't make any more super simple errors. However, I am stupid, so let me know if I'm wrong. After that, a lot of folks argued that because 2 source blocks make infinite water, carrying 2 buckets should be infinite weight. So now seems like a good time to talk about my methodology with how I'm answering the question. Here's the 3 main rules I'm going by. For rule 1, I am not counting anything infinite for 2 reasons. 1, because it's boring. If I gave up and said the answer is infinity, I wouldn't have to do all this research and go on rants about the viscosity of lava. And 2, most things in Minecraft that seem infinite are more accurately inexhaustible. You can take any amount from them and they won't run out, but they still aren't technically infinite. With water you can even observe this, since it takes time to generate the new source block. This is not an endless number of water sources all existing together in these 4 blocks. It's 4 water sources that magically generate a new one if one goes missing. For rule 2, and something else people questioned, when it doesn't contradict rule 1, I am assuming conservation of mass, usually. A lot of crafting recipes could have some loss, especially if they aren't reversible, but either way, in order to account for that, I would need to assume how much is lost, so I default to assuming it's 0, since that makes the math the easiest. If there is ever a known amount of material loss, I will use that instead though. And for rule 3, I'm doing unmodified vanilla survival Minecraft. That means no glitches, like using the crafting slots for storage, no commands, like filling shulker boxes with other shulker boxes, and no unobtainable items, like monster spawners. Those are the rules I'm going by, but if you want to do it a different way, that's cool too. With all that established, the last correction I saw a lot of was my use of kilograms as a unit of weight. That made some commenters pretty mad. Last video, I did flash my reasoning on screen, but it wasn't a great explanation, so here's the deal. Kilograms as force is not a standard unit of measurement, but it is a valid one, and people use it all the time, because most folks have an easier time imagining the weight of 70 kilograms than they do imagining 690 newtons. You won't see it in a rigorous scientific context, but it isn't that uncommon in more casual ones, like maybe a YouTube video about Minecraft. That being said, I am a man of the people. So, to avoid confusion, I will stick a little F right here whenever I'm using kilograms as force. In addition to all the comments that wanted me to use newtons, I also got requests to use imperial units. A few folks wanted me to do scientific notation, and at least one person wanted more prefixes. So here's what I'll do with all that. Whenever I'm talking about a weight and not a mass, I'll still say the full result, accurate to the nearest whole kilogram. Then I'll list it in newtons using SI prefixes, freedom units using scientific notation, and, just to make sure I'm covering my bases, I'll also list the weight in 2005 Hyundai Elantras. So I hope that's good. Hope that's enough for everyone. With all the bookkeeping finally out of the way, on to the comments about how to make that total weight bigger. A popular one that I saw was how I forgot about bundles, which, in my defense, weren't in the game when the video came out. But now that they are, if you craft a piece of leather together with a piece of string, you get an empty bundle. It can hold 64 items, but unlike an inventory slot, it can hold any combination of 64 items, not just 64 of the same item. So each bundle can hold one stack. You can put bundles in shulkers, but not shulkers in bundles, meaning that they don't add any storage space to our heaviest inventory, but they can add the weight of 27 bundles to each shulker box. So what is that then? Leather can't be crafted into anything that I can easily weigh. I could argue it should be 1/9 of a cubic meter like iron is, since they can both be crafted into armor, but that seems like a bit of a stretch. But, since the bundle can hold 64 of anything, its internal volume needs to be at least big enough to hold 64 of the highest volume stackable item. Originally, I had a whole section here with some math and iteration talking about the packing problem and how to optimally arrange beds to fit into the smallest area, since beds are the stackable block with the highest volume. I had this whole thing about the merits of the tetradecahedron arrangement versus the trapezoidal prism one, but then I found out that beds aren't stackable, and never were. Which means the highest volume for 64 items is this, which is super boring. It is easy though, because the surface area of a cube is just 6 times the side length squared, meaning you need 96 square meters of leather to make a bundle that can hold these blocks. So the next thing we need to figure out how much the leather weighs is the thickness, so we can take that surface area and make it a volume. Leather thickness is measured in ounces for some reason, and from what I can tell, a coin purse style bag like this would probably use 3-ounce leather, which is 1.19 millimeters or 0.00119 meters thick. Multiplying that by our 96 meters squared gives us 0.114 cubic meters of leather total, which, fun fact, is really close to that 1/9 cubic meter that I used for the iron anyway. Just an odd point of consistency there. Anyway, multiplying that by the density of leather, which seems to be somewhere around 860 kilograms per cubic meter, gives us a total mass of that one piece of leather being 98.2 kilograms. Before we have the weight of the whole bundle, though, we also need to weigh the string. Placing it on the ground shows that it's 64 pixels long and 2 pixels wide. Since the pixels on the string texture are at a quarter scale compared to a normal block texture, those measurements translate to 1 meter long and 31.25 millimeters wide. Assuming it's roughly the shape of a cylinder, we can take those and find the volume using this equation, plugging in width as the diameter and length as the height. Working through all that, we get 0.000868 meters cubed, which means all we need now is the density, and luckily, we already know what kind of string it is. It's spider silk. Or maybe it could be strider silk, but that's not a real thing, so I'm sticking with spiders. The density of spider silk is 1,300 kilograms per cubic meter, meaning the string's mass is 1.13 kilograms. So the entire bundle, instead of 98 kilograms, has a mass of 99 kilograms. Very worth the extra effort for the string. I could increase the weight of the bundles and the shulkers by dyeing them like these friends recommended. And while most of the dyes are just ground flowers that wouldn't weigh much, blue dye can be made from lapis lazuli at a 1-to-1 ratio, and 1 lapis is 1/9 of a cubic meter. The density of lapis lazuli varies, but is around 2,800 kilograms per cubic meter, which makes the mass of each lapis, and therefore each blue dye, about 311 kilograms, over 3 times as heavy as the bundle itself. After that is Steve. I forgot to count the weight of Steve. Steve's body can be roughly divided into 4 rectangular prisms. His torso and legs together are 8x4x24 pixels. Each of his arms is 4x4x12 pixels, and his head is 8x8x8 pixels. Converting all that to meters and working through it all, Steve's total volume is a little over 0.4 cubic meters. Multiplying that by the average density of the human body, Steve's mass is around 410 kilograms. So in Earth gravity, Steve weighs 410 kilograms, which is 4 kilonewtons, 905 pounds, or 0.343 2005 Hyundai Elantras. He's a big guy. As the bucket taught us last time, I can't leave out even the smallest detail, so next is his clothes. Looking at his in-game skin doesn't really offer a whole lot of information, but in the trailers for the Minecraft live-action movie, the most canon source, we can tell that Jack Black is wearing jeans, a sweater, and some loafers. Starting with the jeans, the circumference of Steve's waist is 1.5 meters, meaning his jeans should be either size 59 waist or 6XL, depending on which standard you use. Nobody seems to report average weights for jeans that size, so instead I looked into the jeans production process. So go ahead and add that to the list of things I've had to research for these videos. Using my newfound understanding of denim, I can say that Steve's jeans are probably sanforized, but probably aren't selvage. Sanforization is basically the process of pre-shrinking certain fabrics so they don't shrink later on, and selvage refers to a special way of weaving jeans that makes them fancier and more expensive in order to appeal to jeans enthusiasts. I didn't know that was a thing you could be an enthusiast of. Anyway, the reason those things matter is that both would affect the amount of raw material needed to finish a pair of jeans. By my estimate, everything considered, Steve's pants would probably take about 2.2 square meters of raw denim to create. The density of denim is dependent on its thickness, which, like leather, is also usually measured in ounces, and given the gameplay of Minecraft, I think it's safe to assume that Steve's jeans would be on the tougher, heavier side, like say 20-ounce denim. 1 square meter of 20-ounce denim has a mass of 0.678 kilograms, so 2.2 square meters of it has a mass of about 1.5 kilograms. But before I lock that in as the official mass of Steve's pants, making jeans also requires some rivets, a button, a zipper, and some thread, and all that would add a whole 10 grams to the mass, so we can't leave those out. For Steve's sweater, and also the shoes for that matter, I couldn't manage to get nearly as in-depth of an answer. I tried tracking down this exact shirt, but I couldn't find it. General consensus I found, for a super loose estimate, is that if you use wool, which is the only common sweater material present in Minecraft, a large sweater should have a mass of about half a kilogram, with around 60 grams added per size up. Steve's chest is also 1.5 meters around, which puts him in the vague 4XL to 5XL range for shirts. It's less standardized than jeans are. Going with 4X, that means his sweater should be somewhere around 0.74 kilograms. And then for his shoes, I have even less to go on. I couldn't find these exact shoes, and I have no idea how to figure out Steve's shoe size, since he doesn't, have any feet. So instead, Jack Black's shoe size is 10, and size 10 loafers usually have a mass of about 0.4 kilograms, putting Steve's entire outfit at an estimated 2.64 kilograms, which makes the total mass that Steve himself adds to the load around 413 kilograms. So now I counted Steve. Next up, when calculating the weight for boats and chests, I used the density of oak wood, because I thought it was the densest of the woods. But, as user SeveralBees5115 pointed out, I was wrong. Not only are there over 1,000 different species of acacia trees, but a lot of them have wood that is heavier than oak. So, to move forward, I have to classify this tree, which is hard. I compared the in-game tree to every species of acacia tree that I could find good documentation for. The bark and wood of the Weeping Mile look pretty close, it's got the whole gray and orange color scheme, but zooming out to the whole tree makes it pretty obvious that it's not the right one. So instead, I landed on the Waddywood tree, because it's kinda got the color scheme and the tree kinda looks right. A lot of the trees looked very similar, and I'm not like a dendrologist, so I might be wrong, but that's my best guess. Assuming it is the Waddywood, the logs are an incredibly dense 1,430 kilograms per cubic meter, which gives acacia boats a mass of 1,788 kilograms, and chests crafted with acacia wood a mass of 2,860 kilograms. Considering all of that together, if we take all the blue ice from last time, throw it all in blue bundles, put those bundles into blue shulker boxes made with chests that were crafted with acacia wood, and add Steve's weight, then, after accounting for gravity, we have increased the weight that Steve can carry to a total of 36 sextillion, 993 quintillion, 512 quadrillion, 298 trillion, 186 billion, 689 million, 113,846 kilograms, which is 363 zeta newtons, 80 sextillion pounds, and 29 quintillion 2005 Hyundai Elantras. That's more than before by over 6 quadrillionths of a percent. It's not very much. So what about some suggestions that might actually make a dent? Last time, I claimed that the heaviest armor you could wear would be mostly gold with netherite boots, all trimmed in netherite. The reason I said gold was the heaviest was that netherite armor is normally created in a smithing table using 1 netherite ingot and a piece of diamond armor. So because gold is so much heavier than diamond, any piece of gold armor should weigh more if it uses more gold than the 4 ingots used in the netherite. A few people commented that you can craft netherite normally in a crafting table, the same way you craft the rest of the armor, which would make it heavier than gold, but as far as I can tell, you can't do that. When netherite was first introduced in Snapshot 20W06A, the recipe did use a crafting table, but it still used diamond armor. And besides that, I can't find any evidence that you could ever craft netherite armor using all ingots. Not in any snapshot, or in Bedrock Edition, or even in bug reports. That being said, some other folks pointed out that I didn't include the weight of the smithing templates I used, and I didn't do that because I figured it didn't count. But, since it is consumed in the process, then by those rules I laid out earlier, it should be included. So first off, the netherite upgrade template is made of 7 diamonds and a block of netherrack. The density of diamond is 3,500 kilograms per cubic meter, so each diamond, being 1/9 of a cubic meter, weighs 389 kilograms. The weight of netherrack is harder to pin down, but luckily, in Minecraft Education Edition, we have the material reducer block, which breaks down items into 100 chemical components, each representing 1% of the item's makeup. If we throw netherrack in there, we find that 3% of it is an unidentified substance, which is used whenever an item doesn't exist in real life. Ignoring that, and only looking at the other 97%, it's about 2/3 silicon, with the rest being equal parts oxygen and mercury. Mercury oxide, which, if you couldn't tell from the name, is the compound formed from those two, is a real chemical that has this familiar reddish color. Even more notable is that its mineral form, called montroidite, is among the softest rocks rated on Mohs scale of hardness, just like how netherrack behaves in-game, so it seems like a pretty good parallel. As far as the silicon goes, there doesn't seem to be any relevant compounds made with all three, so instead I'm going to assume that it's some kind of mixture of 1/3 mercury oxide and 2/3 pure silicon by weight, which is a little silly, but it's what we got. Here are the densities of both of those, and working through it, we get a mass of 5,237 kilograms for a block of netherrack. That gives the whole template a mass of 7,960 kilograms, which, when added to the rest, does make every piece of netherite armor heavier than their gold equivalents. For the trim, the heaviest option is the bolt armor trim, made with a copper block that has a mass of almost 9,000 kilograms. Combined with 7 more diamonds, the bolt armor trim's total mass is 11,622 kilograms. Adding it to our armor, now we see that every piece of netherite bolt-trimmed netherite armor has a mass of almost 40 metric tons, with the entire set weighing about as much as a blue whale. If we really want to find the maximum weight of a set of armor though, we'll have to enchant it, which means we have to figure out how much enchantments weigh. As I mentioned last time, the gravity in Minecraft is really dumb, and different entities are affected differently in ways that are pretty contradictory. One unique case is the XP orb. Like lots of other stuff, it has its own acceleration that doesn't really make sense when compared to everything else. So, I'm going to assume that whatever vague magic makes XP work also makes it fall at 4 meters per second squared, instead of the normal 32 meters per second squared. This is important because we can use this equation to determine the mass of the orbs. In the field of aerodynamics, this is normally the formula to determine the terminal velocity of an object in freefall when all these other quantities are known. But since we already know from this chart that the terminal velocity of the XP orb is 29.4 meters per second, we can rearrange the equation to solve for mass. Now we can start plugging everything in. This g in the denominator is the gravitational acceleration, which is that 4 meters per second squared I mentioned. V sub t here is the 29.4 meters per second terminal velocity, and this funny looking p is the Greek letter rho, which represents the density of the fluid that our object is traveling through. In this case that's air, which has a density of 1.204 kilograms per cubic meter. After that, this c sub d is the drag coefficient, which is determined by the shape of the object. And since they're called XP orbs, I think it's safe to assume that they're spheres, which have a drag coefficient of 0.47. The last thing we need is the cross-sectional area that the air is hitting as the spheres fall, which means now we need to measure the radius of the orbs. There are 11 different textures for XP orbs, representing different amounts of experience, and their pixels are at roughly 1/3 scale compared to blocks, so each pixel in the texture is a little over 0.02 meters long. After measuring each texture, we get these radii. 3 sets of them do have different textures, but the same radius, and normally when making pixelated circles, this means they're supposed to be slightly different sizes, but there isn't enough resolution to do anything but guess how big they're meant to be, so I'll settle for them being the same. Plugging those radii into this formula, we get the area of each circular cross-section, and then plugging these into the terminal velocity equation, we get the masses of each orb size, ranging from 12,000 kilograms for the smallest orb to almost 50,000 kilograms for the largest ones, making Experience by far the densest material in the game by a large margin, with the smallest orbs being almost quadruple the density of the sun. Although before anyone asks, they still wouldn't collapse into black holes. You gotta really squeeze stuff before that happens. Two important things real quick before we get to enchanting. First, the different orbs all have different ranges of XP that they could represent, but in most cases, without commands, they'll only ever contain the lowest numbers in those ranges. And second, when XP drops, it always follows a specific pattern on how it distributes the total XP into different orb sizes. More specifically, it follows what's called the change-making problem, which is a fancy math way of saying that when you have an amount of XP, it'll come out in the form of as many large orbs as possible, and then create smaller ones for the remainder. And since that's pretty consistently how Experience works across the game, I'll be counting the weight of XP not in orb form as working the same way. So if you enchant a sword with 2 total levels, which is at least 16 total XP, the weight of the enchantment will be the same as 2 of the third orb at 7 XP each, and 2 of the smallest orb at 1 XP each. Onto enchanting armor, there's 2 places where XP is spent. First is the enchanting table. When using it either directly on armor or on books, it uses a few levels and some lapis lazuli. It's all pretty straightforward. Less simple is the anvil, whose mechanics are unnecessarily complicated. Basically, when combining 2 items, things that go into the final cost are the number of times both items have been used in an anvil before, according to this chart, the enchantments of the item in the right slot, according to this chart, 2 extra levels if the item in the left slot isn't at full durability, and 1 extra level if the item is also being renamed. And also, one of the dumbest design choices in the game, if all those things together add up to more than 39 levels, it becomes impossible to combine the items in survival mode, even if you can afford the level cost. The most efficient way to enchant armor with the best enchantments is pretty well documented, but to find the maximum weight of the armor, we need to use the least efficient way, and as far as I can tell, nobody's done that. I tried for a while to do it by hand, but the rules are complicated enough and the 39 level limit is arbitrary enough that, unless I'm missing something, which is very possible, mathematically determining the absolute maximum is really difficult. So instead, I wrote a script to check as many different sequences of enchantments as possible. I gave it the rules of enchanting and anvil combination, and I gave it 2 extra restrictions to tell it not to waste any enchantments that don't end up on the final product, and to only rename 1 time, since it would be redundant otherwise. Ran it for a few days, and here's what it came up with. First, get 19 netherite helmets bolt trimmed with more netherite. Enchant 16 of them directly on the enchanting table, 8 of them with blast protection 1, 4 with unbreaking 1, and 4 with respiration 1. Then, secure enchanted books with curse of binding, curse of vanishing, and mending, and apply each to the last 3 helmets. Hey, quick note here, small mistake I found while editing. If you use a book for curse of binding, the final anvil combination will be 1 level over the cap. So instead, at the very beginning here, you have to find a diamond helmet with curse of binding from like an end city or something, and then upgrade that to netherite. Because of that, all the final numbers after this explanation are going to be 4 levels and 1 book higher than the real answers. Sorry about that. Damage all the helmets slightly except the Curse of Binding one, and do the same to every newly created helmet unless otherwise stated. Next, combine the 4 Respiration helmets into 2 Respiration 2 helmets, and combine those into a Respiration 3 helmet. Do the same with half the Blast Protection helmets, and with the other half of them, combine each one into an Unbreaking helmet to create 4 Blast Protection 1 Unbreaking 1 helmets, making sure that the Blast Protection helmet is on the right of the anvil each time. After that, combine the Blast Protection 3 helmet into the Respiration 3 helmet, and combine the 4 Blast Protection 1 Unbreaking 1 helmets into 1 Blast Protection 3 Unbreaking 3 helmet. Then, combine that into the Blast Protection 3 Respiration 3 helmet. Combine the Curse of Vanishing helmet onto the Mending helmet, and then combine the product onto the Blast Protection 4 Respiration 3 Unbreaking 3 helmet. Don't damage this one. Combine the Curse of Binding helmet onto it, don't damage this one either, and now, and only now, give it a funny name. If you did everything right, the last 2 anvil uses will both cost the maximum 39 levels, and the final helmet will be the combination of 19 netherite helmets, 19 lapis lazuli, 3 books, and 380 levels. For the chestplate, do everything almost exactly the same, but replace Respiration with Thorns, making it cost 402 levels. The leggings are also almost the same, but replacing Respiration again with Swift Sneak books, and only getting it to level 2 at the end, making the final leggings represent 17 pieces of armor, 17 lapis, 5 books, and 344 levels. Lastly, for the boots, do the helmet thing again, replace Respiration with Depth Strider, and replace the Mending book with a Soul Speed 1 book for 370 total levels. Quick side note, in the time I ran my script, it tested this many different sequences on how to enchant each piece, and while I did have it prioritize certain patterns that should have led it to find the more expensive sequences as early as possible, I might have missed something, and to properly brute force the problem, it would need to test something like this many sequences. So I'm not super confident that these are actually the highest these numbers can get. If anyone can beat them using the same rules, let me know. To make this whole set, you need 17 sets of netherite bolt-trimmed netherite armor, 2 extra helmets, chest plates, and pairs of boots, 74 lapis lazuli, 14 books, and 1,496 levels of XP. We've already gone over the masses of the base armor, the experience, and the lapis, but to find the total mass, we need to figure out how heavy the books are real quick. Since we already have the weight of 1 leather, we just need the 3 paper. Paper in Minecraft is crafted with sugarcane, which is odd. Sugarcane is not really related in any way to anything traditionally used to make paper. It's about as close to papyrus as pineapples are. But it is in the same family as bamboo, which can be used as a wood alternative when making paper, so I'll be using that as a reference. The sugarcane to paper ratio is 1:1, so the mass of 1 paper should be however much 1 sugarcane can produce. The default sugarcane texture appears to be 8 cylinders with a height of 1 block and a radius of 1 pixel each. Converting those to meters and plugging it all into this formula for the volume of a cylinder, we get that 1 cane has a volume of just over 0.01 meters cubed, and all 8 have a volume of just under 0.1 meters cubed. The average density of sugarcane is 272 kilograms per cubic meter, so 1 sugarcane has a mass of 26.7 kilograms, and for once, we have a known loss rate for a crafting recipe, since our real-world stand-in bamboo has a pulp yield of 50%, meaning only half of the material actually becomes paper. So each paper has a mass of 13.4 kilograms. 3 of them add up to 40.1 kilograms, and when combined with the piece of leather, the whole book's mass is 138 kilograms. Now we can finally tally up the armor. For the helmet, the 380 levels it contains represent at least 590,270 experience points, which, by the rules I went over earlier, would be made up of 238 of the 2477 XP orb, and 1 each of the 617, 73, 37, and 17 XP orbs, which is a total of about 11.8 million kilograms of experience. Combined with the 19 helmets, 19 lapis, and 3 books, the final helmet's mass is 12,589,781 kilograms. For the chest plate, its 402 levels are spread out like this and give the final chest plate a mass of 14 million kilograms. The leggings have 344 levels, which forms these orbs, and alongside its different overall materials, make the final pants around 10.3 million kilograms. And the 370 levels for the boots break down something like this, and the final boots have a mass of just under 12 million kilograms. Altogether, my best shot at the heaviest armor in Minecraft has a total mass of 48,921,500 kilograms, which is a lot heavier than the 88,000 kilogram armor we were using before. But, before we're done with XP orbs, what about the experience that Steve carries himself in the XP bar? The maximum level achievable in vanilla survival Minecraft is 238,609,312. When you reach that level, the XP bar completely disappears and no further experience is tracked. To get there, Steve would need to collect over 2 quintillion XP, which, when condensed into orbs, would become 830 trillion of the heaviest orb, and also some smaller ones. Totaling it all up is a mass of 40 quintillion, 818 quadrillion, 704 trillion, 228 billion, 496 million, 67,857 kilograms. Which is a lot, and together with the armor, it does make a dent, but it still doesn't add a whole lot to the 36 sextillion kilograms of blue ice that Steve is already carrying. So, what if instead of adding weight on top of the blue ice, we try and replace it with something even heavier? Nether stars were suggested a few times, with some comments even estimating how much a star that size would weigh, but the problem with nether stars is that I don't really see all that much evidence that they're actually, real stars. I looked for any indication that the nether star might canonically be some kind of condensed star in developer statements, in official books, in the spin-off games, but I don't think they've got any lore like that. They have star in their name, and they produce some light, but both of those also apply to fireworks stars, and I don't think those work on nuclear fusion, so I'll have to pass on nether stars for now. But I will come back to it if I find out I'm missing some information somewhere. With that out of the way, these folks had a pretty funny suggestion. In the 2024 April Fool's Snapshot 24W14 potato, 9 poisonous potatoes can be crafted into a poisonous potato block. 9 of those can be made into the compressed poisonous potato block, and then further compressed into double, triple, and finally quadruple compressed poisonous potato blocks, which, fun fact, have the longest name of any item in the game. A single quadruple compressed poisonous potato block contains 6,561 cubic meters of potato. So, now we just need to figure out how much potatoes weigh. First, we need to identify the potatoes, because there's a lot of different kinds. The most popular, and what people think of when they think potato, are russet potatoes. But most russet varieties have darker brown skin and an elongated shape, whereas Minecraft potatoes are a lighter yellowish color and are more round. So my guess is that these are instead Yukon Gold potatoes, which is another popular cultivar. What makes a potato a poisonous potato is probably a solanine buildup, which is what happens when a potato is exposed to too much light as it's growing. Solanine is colorless, and this green color is actually a chlorophyll buildup, which isn't toxic, but it does happen under the same conditions as solanine, so the two are associated. Overall, though, neither would affect the density of the potato in any significant way, so the poisonous status doesn't matter that much. I couldn't find the average density of Yukon Gold potatoes, so even after all that research, I'm going with numbers from russet potatoes anyway. I could buy a bag and measure it myself, but I didn't. Look at the runtime, this video is already high effort enough. Assuming our potatoes roughly follow this 634 kilograms per cubic meter figure I found for the russets, one quadruple compressed poisonous potato block should have a mass of 4,159,674 kilograms, which is a lot of potatoes, but it does fall short of 1 blue ice. So that's 0 for 2 on new things heavier than blue ice to fill the shulkers with. But, as user Supreme Dorian pointed out, when I went over sponges in my last video, I said they can hold a maximum of 65 source blocks of water. This number is incorrect and comes from the lame, obsolete fandom wiki. The much cooler modern wiki says they should absorb up to 135 water sources, but in testing, it seems to me like they actually cap out at 118 blocks. Since blue ice is only equivalent to 81 source blocks of water, either way it should weigh more. A dry sponge has a mass of 200 kilograms like before, but if it absorbs the maximum 118 source blocks of water, that mass goes all the way up to 258 quadrillion, 558 trillion, 900 billion, 867 million, 775,882 kilograms. Almost 50% more than a block of blue ice. I won't say final this time, since that word's already come back to haunt me twice now, but if we give Steve 37 blue shulkers made with chests crafted with acacia wood, fill all of them with blue bundles, each with a stack of full sponges, equip him with the heaviest armor I could find, max out his XP bar, and account for the mass of him and his clothes, then, after applying the gravity difference, the amount that Steve can carry in survival Minecraft without modifying the game is 54 sextillion, 24 quintillion, 852 quadrillion, 323 trillion, 760 billion, 766 million, 427,802 kilograms. That's 513 zeta newtons, 119 sextillion pounds, 45 quadrillion, 2,500 elantras, and a little over the weight of Jupiter's moon Europa. That's as far as I'll take the carry weight this video, so let's look back at Steve's punch force and his kinetic boat bombardment attack. Both involved packing as much weight as possible in a boat, and I did that by adding a chest and filling it with more blue ice shulkers. But, if you're some kind of weirdo who plays Minecraft with friends, these comments suggested replacing the chest with another player for more weight, and these ones went even further, suggesting putting a mount in the boat to hold the second player for even more weight. Most mountable mobs cannot be in boats in survival mode without bugs, but pigs can, and also striders can, but that's not a real thing, so I'm sticking with pigs. A Minecraft pig is 0.875 meters high at its shoulders, which is the standard way to measure livestock. That puts it above average, but still within reasonable pig range, so I'll estimate their mass at something around 270 kilograms. But in order to ride that pig, we need a saddle, and determining the weight of the saddle is complicated. After almost 15 years, you still can't craft one, and the in-game model for it changes depending on what mob it's equipped to, even though it's all the same item. So instead, I'm going to make the weakest argument in this whole video and assume that the saddle probably weighs about the same as the horse saddle. So what is that even? The horse saddle is a removed item that existed for 2 snapshots while horses were still being added to the game. It did the same thing as the regular saddle, except for horses. Also, its max stack size was 32 for some reason. That's not relevant, it's just very strange. What is relevant is that the horse saddle can be crafted with 3 iron and 5 leather, both items that we've already determined the masses of. When added up, the horse saddle, and therefore theoretically the regular saddle, both have a mass of 3,116 kilograms. So, if we make an acacia boat, put a pig with a saddle in the back, and 2 players both with maxed out inventories, we'd have a total mass of about 33 sextillion kilograms. If we want to calculate the power of Steve's punch, first we note that even with all that mass, Steve can still row with enough force to create 16 meters per second squared of thrust when friction is minimized, which would require 530 sextillion newtons, or 530 sextillion joules at a 1 meter rowing distance. Cut that in half for the power from one arm for a rough estimate of punching power. Last time I went down this line though, I mentioned that it was the wrong way of doing it because rowing and punching don't use the same muscles. But as these friends pointed out, because Steve uses the rare front rowing technique, the muscles are actually pretty similar. So I was wrong about being wrong. Turns out I was right. With one exception, because the oars on this boat, and all boats for that matter, are what's called Class 1 levers, which means the force Steve is exerting on the oar might not be the same as the force that the oars are exerting on the blue ice. Looking more closely at the oar as it's rowing, it looks like the fulcrum, the point it rotates around, is right here. That's 3 times the distance from the bottom as it is from the top, which gives the Minecraft oar a mechanical advantage of 1/3. Meaning that the force Steve applies at the top is cut by 3 at the bottom in exchange for more distance. So he's actually outputting 1.6 septillion joules total, or 800 sextillion joules per arm. And that is a lot, but it still only does 1 damage. Like all these people pointed out, the mobs in Minecraft are really tough, and even some of the weakest animals can tank several of Steve's extinction level punches without dying. Usually. Because this isn't the strongest that Steve's punch can be. Strength potions add a flat damage increase to all of Steve's attacks, with Strength 2, the highest level available without commands, adding 6 total damage. Which means the power of Steve's punch is multiplied by 7, for a total of 5 septillion, 568 sextillion, 205 quintillion, 638 quadrillion, 277 trillion, 182 billion, 937 million, 786,279 joules. That's as much energy as 1.3 petatons of TNT, or the equivalent kinetic energy of 3.2 quintillion 2005 Hyundai Elantras. That potion gives Steve enough power to completely destroy a dwarf planet like Sedna in 1 punch. Onto Steve's strongest attack, if he stays in the boat with his friend, accelerates to max speed, and rams into something full force, we can calculate the energy output by taking that same mass and multiplying it by the boat's maximum speed of 72.7 meters per second. Nobody had any corrections for this one, so, with our new mass, the energy output of the kinetic boat bombardment attack is 87 septillion, 653 sextillion, 834 quintillion, 150 quadrillion, 841 trillion, 322 billion, 722 million, 373,188 joules. Which is 20.9 petatons of TNT, the equivalent of 50.2 quintillion 2005 Hyundai Elantras, and enough power to obliterate larger dwarf planets like Ceres. And that's still not including a bunch of stuff that the comments suggested, like all of these people that wanted me to talk about chests with NBT data. This is gonna be a while, hold on. Alright, there. This was by far the most popular comment I got, even though I clearly stated that I was only counting survival mode. But, in my infinite generosity, I'll cave to peer pressure and do it anyway. That and the rest are all for a future video though. For now, leave a comment if you have any suggestions or corrections for me. Go ahead and let me know what other fields of science and craft industries I should be losing sleep over. And know that Minecraft Steve can lift like a whole lot. Stay nice, everyone.